Hello everyone, this is Tom Simmons coming to you with my first installment of Economics with Tully. This is our first video in both my microeconomics and macroeconomics class. And as you can probably tell by looking at the background, I am not coming to you from downtown Greenfield or anywhere even remotely close. We are making this video on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. And I suppose I could have made this video for you anywhere. I could have made it in my office at GCC. I could have made it at my home office, which has become the office away from the office. But I'm making it here on the Isle of Skye. And this is actually an economic decision. And no, it has absolutely nothing to do with money. And that's often the very first question I get from people when I say I teach economics, is they ask about money, they ask about stocks, they ask about finances. That's not what economics is about. And so for this very first lesson, let's step back from the idea that economics has to do with making money or what's happening with the stock market. Economics is simply a science and an art that looks at the decisions that people make and why they make them. That's why economics is often part of the behavioral or social sciences. It's looking at human behavior. And human behavior is affected by a lot more things than just money. So, if we think of economics from that perspective, what makes people tick? What makes them do the things they do? I happen to love this area of the world. I love making my videos on location, and so it makes sense for me to bring this message to you from across the Atlantic in Scotland. So, for this video, let's look briefly at the differences between macro and microeconomics, because students, even after taking the courses, often confuse these two things. Then we're going to look at the basic presumptions that we make that go into the field of economics, and then we're going to look at modeling, not modeling on the runway, but modeling information to predict human behavior. So first, the difference between macro and microeconomics. In the field of microeconomics, we're looking at the decisions that individuals make. I'm staying right here at a place called Kinloch Aonort, which is a sheep farm. And they chose to take part of their outbuildings and actually make them into very nice guest cottages or guest rooms for people to be able to stay in. That was a microeconomic decision because they made that decision based on their particular situation, what resources they had, what were the different ways they could use those resources, and this is what they came up with. On a grander level, see, that's microeconomics. On a macroeconomic level, what we would be doing is looking at all of the hotel rooms and camping sites and Airbnbs that are available on the entire Isle of Skye and make some major predictions about it. Or draw some conclusions, such as the average price, or how many more units could be made available and still have people come to them and not have empty units anywhere. That's macroeconomics. Micro is what this one person does. Similarly, from the consumer side, a microeconomic decision is the decision that I made to come to the Isle of Skye and come to Scotland on vacation rather than going to Rio de Janeiro, rather than going to Tokyo. I came here. That was a micro decision. It was my decision. When you add up all the decisions of all the tourists in the world as to where they're going, that's a macro view. That's looking at, well, how many millions of visitors go to Disney World every year and how few visitors go to, I don't know, Greenland or something like that. So the difference between macro and micro is simply the difference between the big picture, stepping back and adding up all of the activity that humans engage in, macro, versus looking at what individual consumers and individual producers do, given their tastes, their expectations, the resources available to them. That's micro. So this video basically is a launching point for either of those two fields of study, macro or micro. Let's look at 6 underlying principles that kind of undergird both of these fields. The first is the concept of rational self-interest. Economists make the assumption that all human beings act in their rational self-interest. Sometimes people confuse that with the notion of being selfish. Well, I don't just make decisions because I'm selfish. I had a choice the other day of going to work and making some money or volunteering for my local community family center or food shelf. And I chose to volunteer. So that's not selfish. No, it's not selfish, but it is self-interest. And the reason it's self-interest is because you chose to engage in the activity that brought you the most value. Money has nothing to do with it. So once again, I need you to erase that concept. People act in such a way as to bring themselves the most satisfaction, given the choices that are available to them at that moment in time. That's rational self-interest. If we don't believe that humans act in rational self-interest, then we can never ever predict their behavior. We believe we can predict their behavior because they do make decisions that bring them the most satisfaction. The second one is that value is subjective. A lot of times people will, take something, a bottle of water. How much is this worth? And you can argue over whether it's worth what it took to extract the water from the ground or the cost of making the bottle, and you can have all sorts of philosophical battles about that. But what that bottle of water is worth is going to be different from you than it is for me, and neither of us are wrong. That's the important thing. Value is individual, value is subjective. While I'm over here in Scotland, I might find some some antique, some ancient piece of architecture or something that is part of my family going back a couple hundred or 1,000 years. To me, that item is going to have a very, very high value, and I'd be willing to pay a high amount for it. For someone who has no connection to my family or to Scotland or to whatever artifact it was that I found, that particular thing probably has zero value, and they're not going to be willing to pay much for it. So value is subjective, and there's no such thing as something being worth a certain amount of money. Depends on what the consumer is willing to pay for it, and we're all different. Third, we all react to incentives and disincentives. It's basic part of human nature. Maybe I didn't want to stay at the jazz club we were at last night. I was pretty much done for the night. And someone says to me, "Hey, why don't you stay for the next set? I'll buy the round of drinks." You know what? That's an incentive that might make me say, you know what? I'm going to hang out for the for the next round of music. The same way if I say to my one of my children, "Hey, if you wash the car, you can use it for the rest of the week." They may be a lot more likely to wash that car because it's an incentive to get them to do something. Government does this all the time. They create incentives and disincentives because we know how human beings will react to these. They will add additional taxes on items. For instance, the government is always raising taxes on tobacco products because they know the higher the price, the more of a disincentive it is for people to actually go out and buy that particular good. And that's what the government is trying to do, is discourage purchase of tobacco products. Therefore, they create a tax as a disincentive. On the other hand, if government wants you to engage in cleaner energy and they'd like you to have solar panels, they might create a tax deduction on your income tax. Why? Because it creates an incentive. Everyone knows human beings react to incentives and disincentives. Whether or not those incentives and disincentives are effective to the extent that government hopes they are is another question for examination. But the point is, we all realize that we do react in this way. Fourth, something called opportunity cost. Everything you do, every decision you make comes with an opportunity cost. Because I am here in Scotland, yes, I had costs involved in doing that. I had plane tickets, I had hotel tickets, I had the wear and tear on my poor old body from traveling and losing hours and gaining hours and all of this stuff. I'm spending money on food that I probably would not otherwise spend. But my full opportunity cost is also everything else I could be doing if I wasn't here. I have a small farm back in Chester, Vermont. I could be working those gardens. I'm probably going to lose some of my crops this year because I'm here instead. That was a cost to me, an opportunity cost. I could be, my goodness, I could be having tea with my mother. I could be hiking the trails that start in my backyard. I could be doing any number of things. By choosing the trip to Scotland, I gave up all of those other things. And the reason I gave them up is because that cost was not as significant as the benefit, the value that I get from coming here. You see this in your own life. Your opportunity cost of going to school is everything you could be doing if you weren't going to school, like working another full-time job, or I don't know, having parties every day when now you have to study. Sorry about that, guys. We all have opportunity costs in the decisions that we make, and it's everything we've given up to do or to engage in the choice that we've chosen. And critical here, let's backtrack a second, because value is different for every person, people are going to make different decisions. One person says, I'm going to go to GCC full time. I'm going to get all these courses under my belt and I'm going to get a degree. Another person says, I'm not willing to give up my apprenticeship with my local plumber. So I'm going to skip college and I'm going to stick with this plumber and advance in my career and make more money. Did either one of those people make the wrong decision? No. They made different decisions. Their opportunity costs were different because they value things differently. So that's opportunity cost. 5. The universal mechanism of exchange for all people is price. And this is one of the hardest ones that students have to get their arms around, I think. You could have a government that says you cannot make, buy, purchase, or use a particular product. Let's say it's alcohol, like during Prohibition. Does that mean that people stop making alcohol? Does that mean that people stop drinking alcohol, selling alcohol? Of course not. It still exchanged hands. It exchanged hands on the black market, and the exchange mechanism was price. I will sell you this alcohol for a certain price if you're willing to buy it from me for that price. Same thing happened for years and years with cannabis and many other choices. Even if a government says we want to make everyone equal, so we're going to give every single family a loaf of bread every day, that makes everyone equal. Are there going to be families that don't want bread, that have gluten allergies, that just aren't into bread? Of course. Are there going to be families that could use more bread because maybe they have 8 children, or they really love bread, or they're carb freaks? Yes. So what happens? What happens is, out from under the eye of government, people make exchanges, and price becomes the universal mechanism of exchange. Even if it's not money. We have, in fact, in our personal life, we have close to 40 chickens. We produce more eggs than we could ever, know what to do with. We don't have enough kale. We love kale. We have a neighbor who grows a ton of kale. So guess what happens? We give them eggs, they give us kale. It's a price mechanism, even if it isn't a dollar mechanism. It's exchanging value for value. And the last principle that undergirds all of what we're going to look at is the notion of marginal thinking. When people make decisions, and because that's what this course is all about, the decisions people are making, when they make them, they don't make grand decisions. They make decisions from this point. What do I do now? So for instance, once again, using this trip as an example, we're in Scotland. If the rent-a-car we have breaks down, we don't re-examine the idea of, should we go to Scotland on vacation? We're already here. The decision-making process starts with, well, now we're here and we have a broken down car, what should we do? Should we call the rent-a-car company? Should we expect to stay here a few more nights and make changes in our itinerary? Should we say, you know what, we don't need a car anymore? You make the decision based on the costs and benefits available to you at the moment that decision has to be made. It's the same thing if your boss comes to you at work and says, hey, listen, we got a big job coming up this weekend. I know you normally don't work on Saturdays. Could you work for us? I'll pay you time and a half. And you're saying to yourself, well, I had this big event planned that I was going to go to. And you start weighing in your mind the importance of the event that you were planning on going to versus the possibility of making time and a half on a Saturday instead, plus perhaps winning your boss's goodwill. Marginal thinking. You weigh the costs and the benefits of the decision that's right then and there before you. That's how most of us act in life, as opposed to these huge, big, grand decisions. It's one at a time. So we take those basic 6 principles that we all act in a rational self-interest to maximize our happiness. And there's nothing wrong or bad about that. We do it all the time. That those decisions will be different between us because value is subjective. We will respond to incentives and disincentives when they're offered to us in that decision-making process. We are giving up more than just a price tag when we choose to purchase something, because there's an opportunity cost. If I buy a salmon dinner tonight with the 20 pounds that I have, it means I'm not buying the Angus burger. Okay, you can't have everything, so you give things up to get the things that you choose to go for. Price is going to be the universal mechanism of exchange, and that's that exchange of value between people. And you're going to make a million of small decisions, one right after another. With all of those as background, with all of those as the underlying principles, what we then do is we start modeling human behavior with a 3-step model. And this 3-step model is really very simply this. First, an economist collects data. We want facts and figures, not emotions. We want to know how people actually, truly act. Not how they say they're going to act, not how they want to act. Many years ago, I was the administrator of the Planning Commission on Martha's Vineyard. And the state made us do a big survey on the island about what people thought about increased bus service. So we did what they told us to do, and we asked thousands of people how they felt about increased bus service on the island for transit. Everyone said they loved it. Everyone said they would ride the bus more. Everyone said this is the best thing since sliced bread. So of course the state increased the number of buses. Guess how many additional people rode buses? 0. That's right. Because we have to exchange, as an economist, we have to differentiate between what people say they want, between what they think is the right answer, between what they think is good, and how they actually act. So our first step in our 3-step model is to collect raw data. So in that example, it would be how many people actually ride the bus now. What times do they ride the bus? Where do they start from? Where do they go to? When do they return? Let's get real data. And this is the difference between what we call positive versus normative thinking. Positive thinking doesn't mean the opposite of negative. It simply means fact-based. So a positive statement would be something like, the unemployment rate is 4.2%. Objective, you can verify it with data. A normative statement would be something such as, the unemployment rate is too high. There's not enough jobs around here. Those are subjective statements. They are conclusions. They can't be tested because they're kind of touchy-feely and emotional. If you want to tell me how many open jobs are available, what their pay rate is, what the skill set of the people looking for jobs are, now I have positive data. Now I can begin using that. I can't use emotional, subjective statements such as, it's too expensive around here, taxes are too high, there's not enough daycare. You know what, you may be right in how you feel, but for an economist, we don't want to know how you feel. Sorry. We want to know the data, the facts, the specifics, the numbers, okay? So after we've collected all those numbers, the second step is to create models. And sometimes it's tables, sometimes it's charts. In economics, you're going to get sick of seeing graphs because that's the model we most often make. Once we make those models, we then can predict human behavior. And so one of the most common models you will see, it's one of the first ones you're going to see in this course, is a model that compares people's demand for a particular good or service and the price of that good or service. Because we have data on this. A supermarket has a bunch of cornflakes, people aren't buying them, they want to get rid of them before they go stale, so what does the supermarket do? Puts them on sale. 2 for 1. Buy 2, get 2 free, whatever it takes. Is it successful? Yes, that's why the supermarket does it, because it's successful. In other words, they are now giving us data that says when the price of something decreases, when people think they're getting more for their buck, they'll purchase more of that good. We could make a model of that by having cornflakes the high price before and the low price after. How many people bought under the old price? How many people bought under the new price? Bingo. Not how people feel about it. We've got hard data. We can create a graph, and we can even predict if we drop the price even further what might happen. Or if we pick a price in between those two, what might happen. And so this is a little bit of a science, and it's a little bit of an art, because you're getting inside of people's heads, and there's millions of people, thousands of people involved in decisions, and trying to figure out what's going to work for you as a business, as a person who's involved in business, as well as trying to figure out how each individual consumer is going to act, microeconomics, or how they're going to act when you add all of their decisions up together. What's it going to look like? So this has been a race through an introduction to economics, either macro or micro, coming to you from the Isle of Skye in Scotland, because in terms of bringing value to me, this is one of the few places on earth I'd rather be than anywhere else, and so that's why I'm here. Hope you enjoyed this course. Look forward to more videos with you.